I have no experience editing video, but it seems to me that it would be easier to assemble a series of 10-second clips, if you will, in some external editor, or maybe you can do that right within Runway. That's the fundamental question I have.
I would still say that Runway overall is still worth the money if you are a video creative, just for its entire suite of tools.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Friday, and you're watching the Daily AI Show live. And today we're diving into Runway's latest offering, Gen-3 Alpha. And joining me today are Andy, Jyunmi, and I am Beth. So, Runway dropped Gen-3 Alpha a couple weeks ago, maybe slightly longer than that, and creators on X are still posting their, I'm blown away videos of what it can do. It's not just good video, but it's also relatively fast. So they say you can whip up a 10-second clip from a text prompt in just 90 seconds. Its ability to generate text within the video also makes it stand out among other strong video platforms like Luma. And I'm just going to say we would love to compare it to Sora as well. But of course, slight shade to OpenAI. We're all still waiting for access. How many days has it been? Actually, if you want to know how many days it's been, we're going to add a countdown to our newsletter of all the things we're still waiting for. So if you haven't signed up for our newsletter yet, it's at thedailyAIshow.com. And you too can join us in our It's Been Announced, but we still don't have it waiting vigil. Okay. As you know, when we're doing a tool review, we'll be honest. We're going to talk about its strengths, its limitations, and all of those good things so that you too can make your decision about whether you want to play with this. Jyunmi's going to do a big overview, and he's generally really good at identifying what's still available in the free features. So we'll see if we get to that. If you've been using this, we would love to hear your comments. Go ahead and pop them in the chat, and we'll try to get to them if you have questions also. So that said, Jyunmi, you wanna take this away as our video expert, all things video.
Well, thanks for gassing me up, Beth. But let's take a quick overview, what I like to call my initial impressions of Gen-3 Alpha. When they announced Gen-3 Alpha, when Runway announced Gen-3 Alpha, it came at a great opportune time, in line with the other hype cycle of coming down off of Sora. There's the Chinese Cling, there's Luma, and then all the other text to video tools that have been, simmering in the pot over the last few months, such as Pika and things like that. They say Gen-3 Alpha is a step towards their general world models, which I found really interesting when they announced that concept a few months back, talking about how they want to approach a more holistic environment view for their AI models, so that it looks at what the physics are and how things should move and how things should breathe in that whole environment, as opposed to just cherry picking the details, right? So if you do have access to Runway, I do have a paid account in this case. Just their basic standard account, which costs about $15 a month. And I would still say that Runway overall is still worth the money if you are a video creative, just for its entire suite of tools, right? So if you're not already in another ecosystem, this really isn't is this a better tool set than other tool sets kind of thing. So like removing background, adjusting your video to another type of video style, lip syncing their video, even though this is relatively new. And just, you can use all of these different tools, erase and replace, 3D capture, 3D texture, right? There's a couple dozen tools that you can use to adjust your pre-existing output or your pre-existing film, video, images, things like that. So you can take advantage of their suite of tools other than Gen 3. So this won't be focusing on those tools too much, just that as an overall package, it's definitely worth the price for that standard standard subscription. Now, Gen 3 Alpha. Let's take a quick look at some of the different outputs that I've created. So I wanted to highlight, number one, some of the things that they had to output in their own documentation, their own guides, right? They had some samples. They showed you some general structure, and we can go we can go into that a little more in depth when talking about their prompts and the guide itself. But let's take a look at some of their examples and the output that they get, because obviously they're going to give examples that they think can output great looking material if they're advertising that, essentially, or sharing that with everyone. So this first sample is the example they give for their prompt structure. As you can see, they have two settings for what kind of output that you're going to go for, either 5 second or 10 second. Now, the 10 second is a little longer than most of the output offerings. Most of them are like 4 second range, and even Runway was at the 4 second range for quite a while for the earlier generations. So I found it interesting that they're willing to create a default session size or content size of 10 seconds. As you can see here, the prompt is low angle shot. So as part of their structure, establish the kind of camera movement that you want, or camera angle. The camera is angled up at a woman wearing all orange as she stands in a tropical rainforest with colorful flora. The dramatic sky is overcast and gray. All right, so this is their very first prompt to give you an example of their structure and a sample for you to try. I found it interesting. A couple of notes on the output, right? Each output's going to be different, and you can tell by this prompt there's a lot of room for interpretation, right? I didn't expand the prompt out to say like what was the hair color, what kind of clothes was the subject wearing, what kind of rainforest I was imagining, or what kind of flowers and things like that. So none of those prompt elements to go into that fine detail were added here. This is an example of here is the sample they gave. This is what we expected to get out. I thought it was an interesting choice by the AI to add rain, and that could just be drawing from what it's interpreting a rainforest to include. But I would say also that's its weakest point in this image is the creation of this kind of rain. This might look better in a different kind of format or a different kind of background, but since the rain seems to come to the foreground as the subject's walking away from the camera, it really doesn't quite blend quite right. I like the hazy, misty generations, which is a point in its favor, because those kinds of textures are usually fairly difficult to generate. I will say her hair itself has some pretty good generation, though if you watch very closely, it separates from the body as she walks. So there's some artifacts and things like that. So whether it's perfect off of one of its sample prompts, definitely not. But are we seeing some vivid flowers in all of this underbrush? Yes. Can we see individual leaves and it not warping, having too many warps into something else? Yes. So I do say it is a significant update to the previous generations. So they did also give a few other examples. So I wanted to try those examples that they had put in the guide itself. And the guide does break down some of its examples of, this is the kind of camera movements you can plug in reliably. These are the kind of lighting that you can plug in. This is, the kind of textures and even titling and things like that. So this is one of their next prompts that they have in their guide, which is continuous hyperspeed FPV footage, and that's first-person video or viewpoint footage. The camera seamlessly flies through a glacial canyon to dreaming cloudscapes. And it does do that. Some of the issues I have here is as we're zooming through the glacier and coming into the cloudscapes, you can see the transition is still fairly harsh. It doesn't trick the mind enough to accept that jump between the two scenes. But it does have all the qualities that people are expected to come with FPV video. And that's usually like a sort of fisheye lens on top of a drone flying through something.
Yeah, so another way to describe this would be a drone video, but FPV is the industry term that would...
Yeah, more like it's an understood or an accepted term or a standard that's been around for a long time. Using that as a descriptor, you're going to have more people who understand what that is. Now we're moving on to a little more complex description, right? This is more describing the scene. This is also from the guide. A glowing ocean at night with bioluminescent creatures underwater. The camera starts with a macro close-up of a glowing jellyfish and then expands to reveal the entire ocean lit up with various glowing colors under a starry sky. Camera movement. Begin with a macro shot of the jellyfish and then gently pull back up to showcase the glowing ocean. So this is a great example of how they want you to structure multi-component output, right? I want you to start with one scene and then transition to another scene. I want you to use one type of camera shot and then transition to another camera shot. So this is a great example of showing how you can transition scenes with a single rendering. This would probably be pretty good as if you've already generated your first scene and you've generated your second scene and you need some, in between. And that's one of the highlights that Runway has had for the last couple of generations is they have a seed generator, right? So you can work off of a seed number to try and provide you better consistency. Right? I also am making the assumption that this is an example of transitioning from scene 1 to scene 2 because they plan on expanding further the length or duration of the generation, right?
Right. So. And is this new, like there wasn't a ton of need in a 4-second generation to have like a slow transition or like starting and transitioning because it's 4 seconds, right? So this is possible because it's 10 seconds.
Yes. It's more needed anyways in those longer formats. So in the shorter format, you could still have it transition from one scene to another in previous generations, like Gen 2. But like you said, in 4 seconds, there's not much of a need, and it's also hard to see what that kind of transition would look over time because such a short output.
Can I just ask another question, which is, I have no experience editing video, but it seems to me that it would be easier to assemble a series of 10-second clips, if you will, in some external editor, or maybe you can do that right within Runway. That's the fundamental question I have. But it would be easier to have the AI generate these shorter segments and then have a tool that allows you to stitch them together. So you can lay out your they do what do you call it? The screen board or whatever, like there's a term of art for
like on your storyboard and
storyboard. Thank you.
Yeah.
There it is. So you have your storyboard of the scenes that you want to have, and with the tool at 10 seconds, you can have an in 10-second transition from one part to another. But if you did a 1-minute video generated by AI, there would be a lot of different problems within a 1-minute video. It would basically suck your attention away, and you'd be trying to fix that 1-minute generation. Whereas doing a storyboard approach and putting together a series of 10-second ones, each one of which is probably much closer to sufficient because it's short and because it's focused on a certain thing, that would seem like a more practical editing approach to me.
If you're talking about right now and what it's what their ultimate goals are, I'd say yes. Right? If you want to edit between the scenes that you're generating, yeah, you want to pop it into a timeline. You want to work on your transitions and things like that. That's going to be a much faster way to stitch them together. But the ultimate goal I foresee for all of these video tools is to be able to generate entire scenes in and of themselves, right? So this is just step one along the runway to reach their goal. Sorry, had to. But I would say yes for right now. But I think, if the ultimate goal is to be able to generate entire scenes and then being able to stitch them together, or provide scene to scene with consistency reliably, then you should be able to weave all of those together within a single application or a single session along those lines. As a side note, that is something that Adobe is working on, and they released for their suite of AI tools that they say is coming out, is the ability to fix in-betweens, right? Nice. Moving from scene to scene and generating maybe missing frames and things like that.
And I just want to point out that Andy was pushing back on Justin's comment before we even put Justin's comment out, because he was saying, in his opinion, minimum 1-minute clips would be more practical. So thanks.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think I know where Justin's coming from in terms of a replacement. Like if you're looking for, I want the replacement for shooting a minute of video and putting those scenes together. Absolutely. I mean, I think the understanding is we aren't there yet, and these are the steps moving forward. That's why you see a lot of the content that, or produced content with AI video, is either very short, proof of concept, or music video style or music video genre type videos, because those genres or those formats lend towards having a more experimental video POV. And that's where we are. All AI video right now is experimental. I think the most put together publicly released video was that Toys R Us video that was generated, right? The commercial. And the commercial still, an average commercial is still 30 seconds long, right? So it's not at a minute at most. And if you notice there, those are all different scenes that were just stitched together. All right. So I wanted to wrap up with a few more examples. And one of the other samples that they gave in the guide is doing titling, right? So here's their example is a title screen with dynamic movement. The scene starts at a colorful paint-colored wall. Suddenly, black paint pours onto the wall and forming the word runway. The dripping paint is detailed and textures centered and superb cinematic lighting. All right. Now, it missed the mark in a couple of ways. I think you can see that the black paint, you can kind of make out the way letters, W-A-Y at the end, but the beginning, the runway, it didn't show up. But some of the highlights, I would say, is there is some great light reflection off of the black paint to give it its viscous qualities, the way that it moves and runs down the wall, all of those other elements it seems to take away. Now, I don't know how often they've tried these samples. Again, I'm assuming one of the reasons to try these samples is because they tended to do fairly well. We've got a lot of the elements that are described in this sample, but we missed the main thing, which is the title. Other folks have had far greater results, and I think that's a great takeaway for these AI tools or these AI video generation tools right now. Is it's very experimental. It's not ready to just push a button and, do what you will. It is a creative tool, right? Much like you need to know what are the elements that you're looking for. What are you imagining? We know that AI is great at iteration and ideation, right? This is like, if I was imagining just like, oh, I just want this paint dripping effect going on. Okay, so how do I describe that? How can I get that consistently? And what elements do I want it? I want it on this multicolored painted wall. Okay, cool. This is what I'm looking for. And then I add in those elements where I wanted the title or the kind of movement and things like that. So it's all about understanding what are the things that you want to see. And coming in with the mindset right now, I think the creatives who will get the most out of these AI tools is those who literally want to throw paint at the wall and see what comes out of it, right? This is an experimental format, an experimental tool. So you're going to go through plenty of iterations just trying your ideas out. Right? If you don't know what you want quite yet, or you can't quite form what that exact image is in your head, that these tools will really help you bring that out. And we've always advocated that. It's a great partner. It's a great way to, as a sounding board and things like that. AI makes a great partner that way. All right. So I generated a few, I guess there is one more. Sorry, I forgot about that. And this is one more example more about the camera movement and the kind of elements that you can add on here. This one is wide angle panning shot. The camera slowly pans across a mystical forest with towering bioluminescent trees. Fairy-like creatures with glowing wings fit between the branches. The forest floor is carpeted with luminescent moss, and a gentle mist swirls through the scene. I think all of those elements are represented in this prompt. Mm-hmm. I found it interesting that the model made a more animated feel, mm-hmm. right, or animated style to the overall scene. And that's one of the things that I noticed through pretty much all of the AI video generators that I've seen is the AI is making certain choices on, and I'm not exactly sure what the weights are or what the parameters are, right? You can instruct the AI to, hey, make it look like this, style of this. These are the style elements that I want. I want it to have an animated look. I want it to be hyper realistic, things like that. But I would love to understand what their parameters are, like Runway or Pico or whoever, what the parameters are for initial generation. What are the choices, or what is the model being fed as this is what most people want kind of thinking, right? Like, for example, the first prompt where it says, up angle shot of a woman in a rainforest, right? I would think, and this, this comes to probably personal preference, I don't know, but I think there are some maybe general creative choices that most creatives would want to see or imagine in their mind. And that would be, I want to see faces more than I want to see backs, right? Yep. So I don't know if that's a technical choice, if that's a parameter they build into the model, or is that even a subset of parameters or information that's even given to the model? Because I know all of these models, or most of these models, are built onto the, diffusion style things like just compare. But where is the choice to show someone's back, a subject's back, as opposed to the subject's face, without telling it from the user?
Right.
Where are those creative assumptions made? And I think that's that would be an interesting look. And if anybody does have the answer to that, please let me know.
And it may be in that one, it may be that if you ask for a mystical forest, they're making the assumption that you're asking for animation, right?
Exactly. So now what I did is I went ahead and I tried to create some varying prompts from least complicated to advanced or more complicated. I found that it really is either fairly simple prompts that get you great quality, right? And that could come from that whole concept of what the weights are and what the parameters are for generating those kinds of things, versus hyper complication, where you are telling it, I want focal length, I want this camera movement, I want this kind of lighting, this kind of texture, I want these multiple scene transitions, and how complicated you get. So I think from the output that I've gotten, the best output seems to be either from very simple or very complicated. So I'll go through some of these prompts. So here the simple prompt is the medium shot, young boy wearing blue hat, standing in grassy field under a clear blue sky. Background looks great. I like the depth here. It's focused on his face. They even added in some hands and hand movement. I'm sure that's great for checking how well the AI did, and I don't see anything too off to it.
I think
the light moves behind him is pretty great. Good.
I think the right hand is a different size than the left hand. Like, this gives to me a little bit of dude, like they didn't ask for hands. Like, what? Why are you?
Why are you putting it in there?
Why are you going for like your?
I applaud them for having that in the description. And you are right. His right hand is a little bigger than his left, but I think that can also be explained a little bit by the camera movement and the angle. The right hand's going to be a little closer, but.
Yeah, I don't want to let me jump in as a novice on this, but I personally would not be able, just looking at the overall video, to differentiate this from a live shot. Like, this could be a real boy in my interpretation, my visual interpretation of it. So it gets past a threshold of sufficient accuracy in my view. If I look at it over and over and over and over again, I can say maybe there's a centimeter difference, longer right hand, but I think that's true of mine too. Look at that.
It's true. And no one, when you're generating these and then releasing them, no one's sitting and watching it repeat 10 seconds, 10 seconds, 10 seconds. So
I think that the details in the face and the hair are particularly good. I think the hat might be a little off. If we're nitpicking here, but I think the thing that I like the most is with the camera movement, the lighting source, the sun, moves in the expected direction behind the subject and then back out in front of the subject once the camera moves this way. Those are the kinds of things that I enjoy from the creative side, which gives me those like, oh, okay, this is better. I might be able to use this kind of thing.
Plus the camera lens flares that are superimposed on the image. I think those are really satisfying. Yeah.
Now, here's an example of, we'll say it's a medium prompt there. It does everything I told it to, but not in a dynamic way. It's a slow zoom in. Yes, it's true. But you can tell by the way things are lit and rendered that the family photo is not, it doesn't look the way it should be looking, right? With those two lamps like there should be some sort of reflection or sheen off of it. There doesn't seem to be a lot of life or movement in the scene. You can see a little bit by the multiple oil lamps on the table, fire hazard, but you can tell that it's trying to be warmth, and you see that one lamp on the right that's actually on the chair arm. Yeah, I don't think my parents would ever allowed me to put a lamp there. But you can see that there's these elements here, but I feel less about the details and more about the camera movement and the placement of the photo. It's technically correct, but it doesn't look creatively good. So that would be an example of the medium detailed prompt. Now I'm a big fan of sci-fi, so I wanted to see how would it handle lots of different sci-fi elements. And you can see it didn't do so good of a job on the movement options of the main subject, the soldier. As you can see, like the gun morphs in his hand, and it doesn't quite move the way and you can see the barrel morphing a little bit. So it's not the best example of that. But I did like the background. The background worked out pretty well. That seemed to be like a rubble kind of scene and things like that. So what I am noticing overall for all of these prompts is the background as a whole, when described well, does tend to do better. Now, if we can start using this as maybe compositing shots and things like that for larger scenes being built, maybe that's something where we can start bringing more AI video into an overall production. Now, this one is supposed to be an example of a very complicated or advanced prompt. All right. It's a dolly shot, grieving woman in black standing in a rainy cemetery, placing flowers on a gravestone. The camera dollies in from behind, capturing the somber atmosphere and the raindrops hitting the ground. The sky is dark and overcast, and the sound of distant thunder can be heard. Now, that last part is more of trying to give a vibe or essence to what you would feel or what your brain would imagine you're there. I know it can't produce sound, but there's usually some sort of visual element that helps, or the sound helps move along. As you can see, there's some obvious errors in the beginning. I think this kind of gets a little better when we're about 6 or 7 seconds in, and she turns towards the camera a little bit, and we get to see her fine facial features. You can see that Runway's done a lot of work moving into highlighting facial features as part of the development, trying to get greater detail and things like that. Though I would say I would like to see it weighted to where I generate more faces than I see backs or behind or anything like that. I think that's just going to be more useful to me creatively or visually.
They also had her turn into a smile, right? So her facial expression changed as she turned. That's another piece. Yeah.
One thing that's unsatisfying to me for these rain shots that we've seen is that the heaviness of the rain is out of proportion to the degree of wetness of the character.
Exactly. And that's one of those things. Like water effects are notoriously difficult and require a lot of time to really look correct. And so rain is a great example of trying to test it out. And you can see that it still falls short a little bit.
But it would be so great if it worked.
Yes,
right?
Exactly.
Because you don't
testing until it works, and then once it works, it'll be great. Yeah.
Because then you don't have to drive up everything else that was in the scene, right? Or I mean, there's this could be a great thing here.
We're almost there, right? Those kinds of things. Now, this is supposed to be an example of the most advanced because it's all fantastical elements. There's very little realism when in the description, and I wanted to see how far it really would go, right? And so, sweeping aerial shot, massive fantasy castle perched on a cliffside surrounded by a dense enchanted forest. Dragons fly around the towers and knights patrol the castle walls. The camera swoops down from the sky, providing a majestic view of the entire scene. All right. So the camera movements are relatively spot on. Maybe there's only so much you can do, within 10 seconds. Now, admittedly, you can control camera movements and other visual aspects with their other tools, such as motion brush, and I think the one of the tools is camera movement. So you can control those elements. Those tools that people would commonly find for Gen 2. So if you're coming in from using Gen 2, Gen 3 is not across the board yet. In their announcement, they're talking about how Gen 3 will replace essentially Gen 2 in all of the aspects. It's not there yet. So don't expect to be like, oh, okay, instead of Gen 2, I'm only going to use Gen 3 now. You can see some of the details. That's vaguely dragon-like, but it looks like it's got a spire on top of its back for a second there. If you look in the background, the cliffs look animated, but the forest doesn't. And this castle is a straight up inspired by Neuschwanstein in Germany. They have that same kind of breakdown and element, which was meant to look like a fantasy medieval castle when it was built in the 1800s, I think, or 1700s. It's been a while since I visited, but but you can see, like, if you look at the cliffs and the mountains in the background, that's definitely a matte paint or animation style. Whereas what we see in the front is more realistic or hyper-realistic examples. So it looks like it's mixing a bunch of styles here, the more complicated it gets, without any input from the user. So if there's any takeaways from this, I'd say if you're just looking to see if you can get out some quick examples, go simple. Follow the format, right? The 3-piece format in the guide, but go simple for quick output. But if you're looking to try and generate a specific scene and a specific look, you need to go a little more detailed and be a little more clear and realize that there are still limitations.
Yeah.
Okay. The thing I notice in this particular example is that the dragon is not satisfying to me. And I think it points to something that's been, repeated in the comments today, which is these tools need to have better adherence to the physics. So in this particular case, that dragon was supposed to be flying around the castle over this 5 or 6 second clip is hovering, right? But without movement. And it's morphing a little bit. So it ends up being a distraction if you watch it over and over again. Although the first shot, if this was really just a 3-second shot introducing the castle and moved quickly to another scene around the castle, you'd get that there was a dragon involved. But you don't want to look too closely at that dragon and understand that it's impossible unless there's hovering dragons in this particular chassis.
It's clearly filled with helium, right? Yeah. This is clearly a helium dragon. And
So I'd like to close off with just a couple of comments in terms of like practicalities. Number one, props to Runway for coming out with a very good guide that talks about what you should have in your prompt structure. Here are some examples, and then breaking down, here are some keywords to use for different kinds of camera movements, what kind of lighting styles you're looking for, what kind of movement speeds you're looking at, the types of movements, and of course, style and aesthetic keywords. All of these keywords are the things that are going to help you generate the best output. So that's basically it. Oh, and one last thing. You must have at least a standard account, and it costs about 100 credits per 10-second rendering. So your standard account is going to give you about 1,000 credits. And so that's 10 shots. So that's $1.50 per rendering. So
Yeah.
just keep that in mind as you do your creative iteration.
Okay. Well, thank you. I feel like that has been okay.
Before we close out, I want to just draw attention to something that Nico said in the comments, which is that this is going way back when we were talking about using clips and then assembling them into a different editor. He said, I took my generations from Gen-3 and used them in a Lumen 5 video. And not being a video adherent in the world of AI, I immediately did a search for Lumen 5, came up with it. Lumen 5 is apparently a video generator, AI video generator is being used for corporate branding videos. And it's described as, by testimonials on their homepage, as the PowerPoint for video. And it's as easy as PowerPoint to create a video internally in a corporate environment. So I think for our business customers who watch this show for tools, it's worthwhile going to look at Lumen 5 as a tool that your marketing and or sales department might use for videos because the testimonials are coming from some major corporations. I read one from a person inside Siemens Corp. And there's one of those banners on the Lumen 5 page that shows all the major corporations that are using it. So apparently something that's out there in widespread use.
So yeah, Lumen 5's been around for a while as well. They're actually one of the early generative video type of editors and those kinds of programs out there, along with Video.io and Pictory and those. But Lumen's had a long quote unquote history in terms of internet years. That's been
AI years,
right? AI years, exactly. Yeah.
Well, great. So I think we're going to wrap it up there. Thank you so much, Jyunmi. This was a great deep dive. And we are a Monday through Friday show. So we were taking the weekend off, and we'll see you on Monday. Our newsletter comes out on Sunday, so you can sign up for that at thedailyAIshow.com. If you have not subscribed or liked, we would love for you to do that because it's super helpful. Next week, we are talking about is learning to code a waste of time? Because so many people have said that, and so many people have said absolutely not. So you're gonna hear what we think about that. And on Tuesday, as Andy's been talking about this week, we're gonna look at Max Tegmark's vision of AGI 7 years after Life 3.0. And all of us will know what all those words mean when we discuss that. I mean, I know what AGI means. Then we have news. We have a power show. Is fusion how we're going to get there? And there's been some recent news today about fusion, advances in fusion. And on Friday, we'll do our 2-week recap show. Until then, go play with AI. And thanks for joining us. And happy Friday. Yeah.
Aloha.